ready to go? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I call this meeting to order of the Yorktown Community School Board of Trustees, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. You can be seated. Okay, we do have a quorum tonight with 3 of our 5 members present, and our other 2 members are in transit. So Mrs. Gassaway and Mr. Kelly will be joining us shortly, but since we have a quorum, we will go ahead and proceed with the meeting. So we'll start off with public comments. If anybody would like to address the board and make a comment, you can do so at the podium. Just have you sign your name and information when you get there. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less and not of a personal nature. Anybody wish to address the board tonight? All right, we'll move on. And we will now open up a public hearing. And this is a lease hearing for our roof project for Yorktown High School. And so we kind of go through our agenda for this particular meeting. Pursuant to Indiana Code 20-47-3, before a school corporation can enter into a lease with a nonprofit building corporation, which is what we'll be doing with this, corporation must conduct a hearing regarding the execution of the proposed lease and whether the rental to be paid to the lesser building corporation under the proposed lease is a fair and reasonable rental for the proposed improvements. So starting off, we'll hear from Dr. Hinshaw. He'll tell us about the proposed projects related to the lease. Dr. Hinshaw.
So again, this is a bond for replacement of the high school roof, and estimated cost plus or minus $3.5 million. And we're going to talk a little more about the details under reports, but we've been discussing this concept for several months, so I don't think it's a surprise to anybody.
Okay, great. By the way, the notice for this hearing was published as legally required, correct?
Right.
All right. Okay, now we will officially open the public hearing. Remember, if you'd like to speak, please sign out on the sheet, which is located up at the podium. And as I mentioned earlier, we ask that you state your name and address, limit your comments to the proposed rent to be paid under the lease, and keep any comments to 3 minutes and avoid being repetitive if possible. All right, anybody wish to speak about the proposed project? All right, hearing none. Dr. Hinshaw, do you want to summarize the resolution authorizing the execution of the amendment to the lease?
Yes, so the school building corporation has met a couple of times. In fact, they met at 5:30 today to approve their side of this. And so the first resolution is basically, I think it's actually an amendment to an existing lease because there's already a lease in place. So this would just come under that existing lease, where essentially we legally have transferred part of the real estate of the school to the ownership of the building corporation, so that then they can legally sell these bonds, and it's all about the constitutional 2% debt limit. And they have agreed to that, and so the first resolution is you agreeing to that amendment to the existing lease between the school corporation and the building corporation.
Okay.
You want me to go on, or is that?
No, I think that's close enough. It is listed as Exhibit A, board, and the amendment to lease is the agreement whereby the corporation will levy the required property tax to pay the lease payments throughout the life of the bond issue. The lease payments will be paid to the building corporation and used to pay the bondholders to repay the proposed bonds. So, board, if I could have a motion and a second to adopt that resolution authorizing the execution of the amendment to the lease.
Make a motion to approve the resolution, the amendment to the lease.
All
Second.
Right. Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Brooks and a second from Mrs. Gillespie. Any other questions, board? If not, all those in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries 4-0. Let the record also reflect that Mrs. Gassaway has joined us as well. Thank you.
Sorry if I smell like a goat.
Oh, all good. You're good. All right. Next resolution is a resolution assigning bids and contracts to the building corporation at the bond closing. The building corporation will own facilities where some of the renovation work will be completed. Building corporation will also be the issuer of the bonds. As a result, certain contracts may need to be with the building corporation because they'll hold the money to pay the contractors. School corporation will receive the bids and or contracts and awards to the bids and or contracts under state law, but then retains the right to assign those bids and or contracts to the building corporation for the payment of those at the discretion of the board. So if that makes sense, board, I just, that should be Exhibit B. And could I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution B, please?
Motion to approve Exhibit B.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks, with the motion, and thank you, Mrs. Gassaway, for the second. All those in favor vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0. And last but not least, this would be item C. This resolution satisfies the Security and Exchange Commission requirement that a school corporation enter into a continuing disclosure undertaking agreement if it issues bonds to a public or rather two public investors. The agreement requires that the corporation agree to timely provide certain financial information and provide notice of certain material events if and when they occur. And so I need a motion and a second to adopt item C, please.
Motion to adopt item C.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Gassaway, for the second. All those in favor vote by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Vote. Motion carries 4-0. All right. That's the end of the resolution. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn the board hearing, or excuse me, the bond hearing for the roof project. All right. That wasn't exactly according to script, but I think it's probably close enough, Mr. Murphy.
It was.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. That is item 4. So that includes our minutes from the regular meeting on June the 17th, our personnel report, our claims report, the fund report. It also includes the approval for the Washington, D.C. field trip for next year. And before we approve that, Dr. Henshaw, you don't want to talk a little bit about our personnel situation now?
I would say as of, should knock on wood and say as of right now, all of our certified positions are filled with this approval of this report. We do probably have 6 or 8 paraprofessional positions open. That's lower than normal for this time of the year, and our principals have a process to get those filled. And as of right now, all of our bus driver positions are filled. I can't speak to food service, but clerical and custodial are all filled. So we're in very good shape. There's still time for some of that to come apart before the school year starts, but we have started our school year fully staffed in our certified positions with licensed people for 4 or 5 years in a row. So I commend our principals for their work in doing that, and that's a good thing to be able to say. I think I just saw that there are something like 1,600 open teaching positions in the state of Indiana. So good place to be.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Henshaw. All right, board, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
I've got Ashley with a motion and Jason with a second. Any comments? Not all those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0. Do you have internet yet?
Yes.
You have Wi-Fi?
Yeah, we
You
do
do?
now. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
All good.
Struggling.
Okay, moving on to item 5. We'll start with 5A, and that is the 26 budget calendar, Dr. Henshaw.
We give this to you every year. There are comparable dates here, and it will require one special board meeting that we're scheduling for September 30th. Normally it would fall a week later than that, but that's fall break, and I assumed you didn't want a special board meeting that week. So 6 p.m. September 30th, and then budget adoption at our regular meeting on October 21st, 2025. Anything you want to say on that, Kara? So the only thing I would say is maybe go ahead and put that September 30th on your calendar if it works for you.
Did you say 6?
6, it doesn't have to be 6, but we need to know in advance because we have to advertise the time for that since it's a hearing.
6.
And so this item is just approving our calendar,
That's just,
correct?
yeah, it's just information. You don't need to vote on it unless you want to.
Okay. We'll go ahead and put the 6 p.m.
Put that into the calendars. Yep.
And I'm assuming, should we block out 30 minutes or an hour for that meeting?
It rarely takes more than 30 minutes. So,
Okay.
An hour to be safe.
yeah. The 4-H fair will be over by then, right?
Thank you.
Band day, it's all over with by then.
Okay, so no official action needed in terms of approving that,
No.
correct? Okay. Well, hopefully that'll work for Mr. Kelly's calendar too. Ask him when he gets here. Okay, item 5B is the roof.
I just want to report as a matter of information, again, because we've discussed this several times and we don't have a formal agreement with Building Envelope Allies. That's who was suggested that we contact to coordinate this. And their preference has been to try to do this through cooperative purchasing. And Kara and I were aware of some guidance from the State Board of Accounts on that. And so Mara was here last month, Mara Hoff was here last month, and we asked her to do an evaluation of whether or not we could use cooperative purchasing for this project. In the interim, I also talked to Eric Long from Ice Miller, who's our bond counsel that we use. And on the same day, they both told me no. We're of the opinion that you cannot use cooperative purchasing for a roof purchase like this. And so the right approach is to use a traditional bidding process. So I called Russ Mink from Building Envelope Allies the next day and said, okay, are you good to put together the bid specs for us and to go through the regular public bidding process? And he said he was. And so I said, why don't you give me a proposal for your fee for doing that? It'll be a little more involved than buying it through cooperative purchasing. So that's in process. Now, what's the impact on that? I mean, I think certainly it has an impact on schedule, and to a degree, it's going to have an impact on budget, or at least finalizing the budget. If you're buying through cooperative purchasing, you've got a dollar amount that you can point to and say, that's our price. If you're bidding it, then you're going to wait to open the bids to determine what that is. So I'm going to move it forward that way unless there's some objection. And obviously we're moving forward with the bond sale. So we'll have the money to fund it. It'll just be a matter of getting it all organized to put it out to bid.
Sure.
And secure somebody to do the work.
Okay. When do you think you'll have a proposal from me?
Well, I would hope by the next board meeting. So.
Okay. Okay. All right. While we're on the, I want to kind of save softball facility discussion for when Ryan gets here, because he's been heavily involved in that as well too. So before we move on to that, while we're still talking a little bit about the high school, different from the roof, but you had mentioned to me earlier in the week that Brian had made a recommendation that maybe, since we're in the midst of finishing up the football turf installation, spending some money to run fiber and cable and such out to the facility. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, specifically electrical supply. And so there, as I understand it, there is already some wiring out there, but it's old. And so he was of the opinion, I don't know if he consulted Brennan on that, because I know Brennan's been out there some too, and he's had Reed Electric on site, and of the opinion that we need to add some additional lines supply. He specifically mentioned some ability to do better hosting graduation. And then, there was discussion about running fiber into the press box, and price tag of plus or minus $30,000 to do that. So, it's one of those while you're here.
Sure. Sure.
So I told him to go ahead and get pricing on that.
Okay. And then I saw an email from you talking a little bit about the cladding of the concession building and also the work on the press box, speaking of that. So do we believe that, and I know that our turf folks have said the turf's going to be in time for the scrimmage, right? And
That's their goal. No, we don't need any comments from the audience over here. I heard that chuckle. But where's your gavel, Mr. Simpson?
here,
I have been told by Sprint Turf late last week that they felt like it was very realistic that we would be able to host our scrimmage on August 15th on that field.
Okay.
Again, that's weather dependent, and I have no idea how many fields they've done, but it's gobs and gobs and gobs, way more than we've done. So, if they feel like there's a very reasonable chance that that's going to happen, that seems reasonable to me. I have also suggested to Mr. Heidenreich that rather than have anxiety about it, the right approach is to have a plan so that if we don't make it, we need to be telling the people that we're going to scrimmage against, as well as Anderson, that's that opening game, that if we have to move it, we have to move it. I mean, it's just the nature of these kinds of projects, and it'll be an inconvenience, but it'll be a temporary inconvenience.
Sure.
As far as the press box, they are actively working in there. I was in there yesterday, and the inside is torn down basically to the frame, and they feel like they're in good shape to get that done. The concession building, basically you will recall that we made arrangements through Fredericks to have that reclad as a part of the project. Crew Construction, who's doing the press box, asked if they could give us a quote for that. And so we agreed to do that. That quote came back early last week, and it's about $13,000 cheaper than doing it through the project. So we said, well, that seems like a good idea. I did have Paul and Stacy and Brian review that quote and felt like it was a good quote. We could move forward. Then you're in the position of, if you're going to run that through regular processes of the school district, you have to have solicited 3 quotes because it's more than $50,000. So the workaround for that is that you can also run that through the project. So I've been working with Skillman even today to make sure that we're putting that in the queue to be paid from the project budget as we were going to do originally, just to make sure that it's expeditious. And I asked that question to Jonathan from Crew, do you have any concerns about schedule? And he gave a good contractor's answer. I think we can do it. You never know. We'll hedge a little bit. Lee Company is supposed to be on site on the 23rd, starting on the 23rd of July. And that's not a super complex thing. I think the landings on the visitor side will be the most involved, but I don't have any concerns about that piece of it being done. So if you walked out there right now and you said, we're going to play football here 1 month from now, you would say, I don't believe it. But I mean, that's all you can do is trust the people who are the experts. And it is a ton of moving parts. I mean, if you followed that, and the scoreboard was already installed in the spring, so you're talking about 4 or 5 different contractors that are working out there to get that all put together.
Yeah.
So
goalposts are being replaced too?
they are being replaced.
Okay.
Yeah. The plan there is the existing posts. We didn't know if they would survive being taken down. They did, but the plan is to move them over to the middle school and set them on the practice field at the middle school. So I've been asked about that. I said, we'll see what we can do. Not a guarantee whether they can survive the tear down and the move. So far they have. So, but the project will include new goalposts.
We could probably just get a big group of Ball State students to carry those across the river. And that's sort of what they do when you want a championship anyway. So. And then, do we know like an official like the whole high school project is done and we're
substantial completion date on the schedule current is November of 25.
Okay.
So, and that's I'm going to say the end of the work in this sports performance center, as well as probably the renovation of the old vacated weight room. That's probably the very last thing on the schedule.
Okay. And
the office is supposed to be done. within a
wood.
couple of weeks.
Can I request a block
Yeah.
of wood for these meetings?
Do you want this?
Come on.
Yes,
Alex.
I need a knock.
So, yeah, and I would say it's essentially on schedule.
Yeah, they were doing
Office.
flooring today. I think, they're pouring the terrazzo. It was supposed to be today, but I think it's gonna be Thursday.
So Brennan's there. He hasn't lost any hair or anything out of this.
Nope, he doesn't have any to lose.
Hasn't lost any more than he already had,
Yeah.
so that's okay.
But I
That's
caused
a
him
good
to
thing.
lose.
But yeah, the whole project, I mean, if you went back and looked at the original schedule, was supposed to be done in July, so now, but there was so much wet weather in November, December that they didn't get their footings poured to start steel erection for several weeks.
Sure.
And so that put that whole part of the project behind schedule.
Well, there was a dumpster fire in there at some point in time.
It was a literal dumpster fire, and
The
Somebody
day
got
Brennan
that
decides to take off and we're in the car driving.
Electrical line hit.
How about the exterior, what I'm gonna call the gateway going from the parking lot into the football facility?
well, it's not going to be done in time for football, I don't think.
Okay.
But I would guess I would have to go back and look at a schedule and see if that's even itemized on the schedule. But I would guess that that's probably one of the last things that'll happen.
Okay. Well, I know that wasn't officially on the agenda, but I just kind of wanted to get an update, and I was kind
You're
of,
wasting time for
I was
me.
kind of,
It was a filibuster.
yeah,
I
it was
think.
filibuster. So,
I mean that in a nice way.
in a good way, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's save softball for last. Let's do the
Okay.
item 6A and B. So 6A is the approval of our copier quote, and I saw your note that I think multiple people have looked at it and signed off on it, and it's just, it's a renewal. Is it a renewal or is it a replacement?
Well, it's both. It's our previous agreement was also with Van Osdal and Farrar. It was 7 years ago. I didn't know it had been that long.
We are,
And
13 of our existing fleet was replaced in 2018 and went 7 years. We replaced elementary, there was 5 in 2023. So this gets us back to all new copiers and all buildings.
And typically, there actually, I think, is a statute on this, but typically these are 60-month, 5-year leases.
Yep, have been.
So we've gotten some additional years out
We'll have
of.
happy teachers this year.
Motion to approve the copier proposal.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Kelly and a second for Mrs. Gillespie. Board, do you have any questions or comments on it? If not, here we go. All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. And then, do we want Ashley to do the first reading on all these new policy updates as the newest board member? And as a current,
No.
yeah, she's a teacher, she's an instructor, so. Ashley, are you not feeling that today?
I could do it if you needed me to.
I'm not gonna make you do that, that would be.
My story reading voice for everybody.
I will say, so I think everybody knows this, but the way this process works is there are a minimum of 2 Neola updates a year, and usually there's a third legislative updates, and it's already here, by the way. I just haven't had a chance to go through it yet. And so they have suggested changes, recommended changes, but then there are several places in those policies that somebody has to go through and elect choices that they say you can choose this or you can choose this. And so it takes some time. Typically, I go through that, compare it to the existing policy, try to keep it as similar to what we have in place, unless there's some good reason to change it. And then I go through and flag those with anybody's name that ought to read it other than me. So principals get copies of that. Stacy gets a lot of them. Food service gets it. Kara gets a lot of them. And then they have an opportunity to kind of weigh in and say, oh, I agree or I disagree. And then Angela keys all that in through the Neola site, which is now part of Board Docs. And then you get this version. So this is the first reading of new and amended and rescinded policies. And if there's anything in there that you want to talk about, we can talk about, but you'll see it again in August for a second reading and adoption.
Okay.
And the next stack, the May update, is about half the size of this. So it's not quite, but it's probably more critical because it's got all the legislation in it. So.
Did you have a question?
There was one on here about prescription medications. What about on field trips? I've heard that we've had parents that are handing out the medication on field trips. Is that something that we need to?
I think that you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys know, I
When we
don't.
have, like extreme medications, then we have sent nurses on the field
Yeah.
trips, especially overnight. But typically there will be a certified staff member, whether that's an administrator or a teacher that's responsible for the medications. But yeah, I think we could opt to allow kids to carry
Okay.
medications on them, and we were not in favor of that.
I know on the DC and the Chicago trip, I went room to room to the different places that needed it and handed it out to them.
Okay.
So that's what's supposed to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so nothing to do on this until adoption next. But this is your opportunity, board, if you want to dive into all those and review them. Now's your chance, and then we'll vote on them next month. Dr. Henshaw, I had a couple of other things just to maybe put on future agendas.
Okay.
And or just to maybe get us some information on. So our strategic planning process we're going to embark on with our friends from Administrator Assistance, I want to say is set to kick off at the beginning of the school year. So is that going to be next month or is it going to be in September?
I think,
Or this
and
month?
Angela has assisted them. Have they reached out to schedule with each one of you? So
I
I
think
Yeah.
mine's coming up.
Mine's
Yeah,
July
so-
28th.
that's the first thing is going to happen later this month, that each individual board member is going to have some time with administrator assistants, probably Carlotta and Rob. And then they'll move on to the building level, I'm
Yeah,
assuming sometime in
28th.
August.
Okay.
That hasn't been scheduled yet.
Okay. Could we maybe put it on the agenda for August, just for,
Report on
Yeah.
date.
yeah, just so if there are, I'm guessing there are going to be additional meetings and work sessions and
Yeah.
things like that we need to start making calendar time for, and I'd kind of rather know about what
Yeah.
that's going to look like sooner rather than later. And I don't even have any kids. All these people do. So, well, I have kids, but I don't have to take them anywhere anymore, which is great. The other piece, and I don't, maybe this is next month, maybe it's September, but I'd kind of like the board to have, maybe we can do a presentation from staff to talk about the new A through F requirements that are now live and real, effective. Is it for this year, or do we get a year of reprieve before it starts?
They're not official yet. So the first iteration has gone out, and it's time for public
Comment.
comments. So I don't think that is set to be approved until, what is it, September
I
perhaps?
think September, October.
And it would be effective for the following school year, for the 6-7 school year?
I think it's.
Theoretically?
So I think it's for this school year.
Yeah, that's,
But it's not official.
And it's,
Well, there are
This is
some
the whole
components that
arm
can't go into effect until the new diploma cohort is getting ready to graduate.
okay,
So there will be some temporary high school, specifically, sorry, I don't know all your stuff, specific high school items that won't be into effect yet.
okay. Do we know enough yet to be able to make any determinations?
The
that would be
presentation
relevant?
was super vague. I mean,
Too big.
it really is, it looks a lot like they're gonna attach value to the items on the GPS dashboard. So there's some components of attendance, there's some components of assessment, how you perform on assessments, but then it breaks down some other other ways to triangulate that information to determine your grade level besides just performance on a test.
Okay,
I think late fall,
Yeah,
okay.
even second semester.
I can double check those.
but to your point, if you want us to coordinate, this is where we are right now discussion, we can do that.
Okay. Well, ISBA also did a 1 hour, an hour and a half webinar about a week ago, but I couldn't attend. I may have sent that to the rest of you if any of you could attend. But if not, I think they recorded the session. So I'll see if I can get my hands on a link to it. And it was some ISBA folks and some superintendents and maybe even 1 or 2 people from the DOE that were on that webinar. So I'll get a hold of the link and I'll send it to you all if you want to look at it too. But
Yeah, that would be good.
anyway, yeah, it's going to be a little different. Okay, let's move on to item 5C, which is our softball facility discussion. So, Dr. Henshaw, do you want to kind of?
You got several things there in your board packet that you can see, and Dr. Sturgeon can pull them up for the audience, any of it if we need to. So a couple different approaches. One is some information that Ryan's gathered from the standpoint of a bot and some budget and concepts there. In addition, the conversation that we started with Cooley Contracting, they provided me with their budget numbers yesterday, and so those are in there with their concept. And I also loaded in here kind of a summary of the state of our easy ability to finance that we can discuss and go from there. So I'll leave it to the will of the board of how you want to proceed in the discussion.
Well, I think one of them, that is probably worthy of discussion is the bot model, and I sent you guys a document. Ryan has done way more, I think, research on this than maybe any of us, but I sent you guys a document from Barnes and Thornburg, and I do think the bot model has a lot of merit to it. Some of the highlighted positives are that the governmental body has the ability to negotiate the best and final offers with potential firms, and we maintain control of selecting the preferred proposal. So I think you have, when you read, you have a little bit more control over selecting it versus you open up a bid and the lowest bidder is awarded the contract, right? Through the RFP process, limitations may be imposed on who may be an acceptable respondent. There's a defect in the project. The developer is the one responsible for correcting the problem at its cost. That was theoretically the idea behind tennis, but didn't necessarily work out that way. But the bot is a little odd in that technically the firm that you choose has to basically own the facility for at least, looks like a minimum of 30 days, right? Before and it can either be, I don't know if it's leased back to the school corporation for a period of time or but after 30 days, if the corporation wants to say, okay, here's the money and I would guess that the developer would certainly want it that way. They're not going to want to sit on it for a long period of time and
That's the way I understand it. Is they're holding the land and therefore they're a private owner. They don't have to go through this. The public bid process is selecting them. That's the way I understand it. But if the design build process I just don't know. Again, the whole idea is you get it for cheaper, right? So there's another avenue to do it. But, I think theoretically, if you issue the request for a bot, anybody then can respond and say, we want to submit on this project through this structure. But yeah, theoretically is your public process is selecting the developer. They individually or privately select, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, they're selecting the subs and therefore not subject to a public bid process. Cliff notes probably, but yeah, like theoretically they're owning it for a small period of time. I'm sure there's a legal way to make sure we have abilities to take it back. So
sure, which I don't think that would be really an issue. But the biggest downside I think to the design build method, Ryan, is there's this one. So not. It's the 37-day response periods if it's over $5 million, which this certainly would not. So I don't know. If we did the bot method, to your point, you have to adopt the statute for the bond, which is we adopt the provision of the bond statute, which is IC 5-23. After you do that, then you can do anything from doing an RFI for potential companies all the way to an RFP. You can skip the RFI. You basically can control all of that if you want to. So the other aspect that, that we do you want to talk a little bit about you sent some notes out about this, but about the financial, kind of where we are financially, and I think I responded to all of you guys that my goal, or maybe it was just to you, Ryan, I can't remember, that given the amount of unencumbered funds that appears we're going to have left after the high school project, that I don't know, I'd be in favor of potentially doing a bond for the majority of it rather than spending unencumbered cash that we have right now. I'm concerned about burning more cash at this point in time, but if we did a bond, it is going to be it's going to be subject to a petition remonstrance, correct? Because we're at 40% right now. Is that right?
We intentionally kept our tax rate below 40 cents for 2025 with the anticipation that once we get into 2026, it will go above 40 cents. So any borrowing you do for anything at that point under the new statute is subject to petition remonstrance at a minimum.
If we did it in 26.
If you did it in 26.
But if we did it in 25, it would not be, do you think?
If you could get it arranged, it probably would not be. I mean, I had that conversation with Lindsay Simonetto today. The other thing I want you to think about, though, is, and I know it's a constant refrain, but because of the circuit breaker, every dollar you borrow, you're paying for some percentage, 30 to 40%, 30 to 40 cents of that dollar you're paying in the form of lower tax collection in your operations fund.
Right.
So you gotta think through the offset of, okay, is that really how you want to do it?
Yeah. The other piece of this is timing, in terms of the sooner we could potentially approve this, however we finance it and whatever method we use, the more likely that we could potentially have it done by next spring, which would be ideal if we can pull it off. So anyway, board, what do you guys think? There's a lot of information here and a lot to digest. As I said before, the consensus among everyone seems to be we want to do it. We know where we want to build it. We know, for the most part, what we want it to look like. The Cooley bid, if you guys have not had a chance to take a look at that, came in, and this is the group that the Cooley folks are the folks that built the Winchester facility that we went out and looked at. And so their bid, all in, with the exception of, I don't know that included
Batting cages.
Batting cages,
Right.
correct. But if you did everything, so this would be,
Or parking lot.
And no parking.
yeah, correct. No parking is they'd be, if you turfed infield and outfield, you'd be at 1.7. You can just figure 1.7. If you turfed the infield but not the outfield, you're at 1.35. And I also floated the concept, I think, in an email to you all, that would we get any savings if we carved some of the things out? And Ryan, I was thinking about your lighting. When we looked at one of the proposals a year, maybe longer ago, that the lighting bid we had was pretty high. And when you
Yeah, I think we got one of the 120 for just the materials. And I did talk to 528 or wherever the other group is. So the question would be for the contract. And that's why trying to get to the bid scenario is probably most important. Is like I try to pick apart some of that. It's like, well, your lighting looks higher. Like, well, yeah, that might be high. Something else might be low. We feel comfortable with the number in total. But to your point, I like compare. I think there's definitely some savings because I think Cooley is actually self-performing some of that, which is probably where you get some of the savings. But if if you're trying to compare apples to apples, I think it's, parking lot 528 was 350 to 400 for parking lot. So if you take the 1.7, you're 500,000 of savings, but it doesn't include batting cages. There's some netting, some ancillary things that may add up to 100 grand. So I think there's clearly some substantial savings. It's not down to $1 million that we were hoping for, but I think they obviously would be competitive. I don't know, you had the conversations with them, but I don't see like overhead, I don't know is this all inclusive or is there, okay.
Yeah,
It is built in.
I asked that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my thought is like, all right, let's agree to the scope, the amount of money we want to spend or maximum amount and let the best team win. I think we're generally aligned on the scope. I just don't want a shortfall, especially the parking. There's not enough parking there now. So I don't know that you can cut that out. So I do think there's some savings, just a matter of like, put it out to bid and see who wins, whether that's the design, build, or bot structure. I agree with you. I don't think the bot is worth it if there's another avenue to get the savings. So
On the parking side, you basically coordinated the expansion of the PBE. I mean, we just did that on our own, right? And
We've actually expanded parking lots, I think at least 4 times. And I think 3 of those where we just brought in a paving contractor and said, do it.
Yeah.
And that's happened at PBE twice. I know it's happened at YE once, and I may be thinking of the other side of YE. But you could include it in the scope, or you could get some quotes from a couple paving contractors and say, triple this. And in fact, I asked Cooley yesterday. I said, why don't you give me pricing on tripling this, because that's what's shown in the design, tripling this parking lot and get me those numbers, which I don't have.
Okay.
And I did also ask, okay, I went back through it and said, there's no batting cages in here. And they said, that's a $30,000 ad.
sounds, I mean, I think there's probably a sound system. I don't think it's included. There's some netting we had originally, like it protected against the tennis courts or something, I think was in the design.
Well, I think that's, I said this last month that I thought we ought to design what we want and then get people to bid. I mean, I like that the number's lower, but it's like, what's it based on? Like what vision, what specs is it based on? I mean, I looked at like dugouts. They've got like 30,000. Skillman had 120,000. What dugouts do we want? Is it what Cooley think? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is this based on?
What are they gonna look like?
From a quality standpoint of everything. I mean, the turf, the fencing, masonry, concrete, the bleachers was a huge difference. And that's just my concern is like, what have we agreed that we want? I mean, we want a softball field. And I've heard, well, we don't want the best, but we also, I don't think, want bare bones.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about bleachers. And I mean, to me, I still think the dugout and the press box, at least at facilities I've seen, Jason, appears to be masonry. I mean, they all appear to be a masonry construction, not really that, Taj Mahal-like, I mean, to me,
Yeah. So, I mean, my hunch is when it's said and done and you start, adding on some things and parking, I still think it's a $2 to $2.5 million project. I could be wrong, but I mean, I'm happy that their number is favorable, but I'm just concerned, I don't know if you can really have batting cages on both sides with bullpens for 30,000. That seems cheap. You gotta have parking, right? You start getting up there. I think it's a $2 to $2.5 million project when it's said and done.
I don't know, Ward, what do you think? Well, before I ask you that, I did meet with Rachel Nixon last week, really talking about not just what some of the softball folks think, but in addition to that, from a foundation standpoint. So Rachel, I think, is the incoming president for the foundation. And I don't want to speak for Scott Smallstig, but Scott seems to think that there's a decent amount of potential sponsorship money for the facility. And Rachel even mentioned things of, donating tile, not the installation of the tile, but the actual tile itself. So I don't know that it necessarily needs to supersede our approval of what eventually of the project, but I think it would be helpful for us to know too, what does the foundation and the softball community in general believe they can contribute to the project. I mean, I think it's going to be certainly a lot different than the football project, both in the scope and, maybe the interest in that. But I know she mentioned that her and Brian might approach some of the seed companies and some different donors who were not really approached as part of the football project. So it'd be interesting to see what they believe from a foundation standpoint, and just, in general, the softball boosters in the community believe, what's a number or what are things within the scope of the project that they believe that they can fund as well too.
That's good.
Yeah, because I agree. I think we got a short window of like, all right, do we want to? I think there's consensus. We took a pause on this until we understood the roof. When we get to the football project, we're back. This was a commitment we made. I think there's a window to do it. We now have the range of cost, and so I think you and I disagree a little bit on like, are we comfortable with $2 million or 2.5? I think it's close enough that I would be supportive. It's 2.5 or below. You try to get the foundation to raise as much money as possible, but to me, it doesn't move the needle on the decision if it's 2 or 2.5. This is the next project on the list. It's not going to get any cheaper. We all agree we want to do it. Let's make it happen and get it done next year. And if the foundation can raise $200,000, that's less money we're out of pocket. But the financing equation is a little different. But I do think we have some leftover cash and bonding capacity from the current one. Obviously, it's a moving needle for you. It's like, I would press you like, well, what do you think? And it's like, well, I don't know legislatively what our revenue is going to go down. It's a challenge, right? But I think, we can solve the problem, and it's 2 to 2.5. I think we should do the project, in my opinion, do it for next year. So.
Vicky acted like she wanted to say something.
I was thinking over what you had sent, just the remaining money from the current projects and rainy day. Does that eliminate, does that take rainy day to zero?
If you were going to use rainy day money for this, yes. And we can go through that in some more detail here in a minute. But yeah, the short answer is yes, but there's more backstory that we probably need to put some different factors on the table.
Can we pull up the numbers?
Yeah.
What was it remaining? Yeah. Was it 766?
And if I may, Mr. President.
Please.
What are you looking at?
I think.
The budget, what's it titled? Sorry, under.
I think what I would say is,
July 2025.
unless somebody wants to correct me,
financial PDF.
There's consensus among the board. Consensus means all 5 of you agree that softball is your next major capital project. I think everybody agrees on that. And I hope I've been clear all along the way that I felt like the district would easily have at least $1 million to put toward that project at the point that the dust is kind of settled on some of these other projects, and so we can evaluate, okay, what do people want, what's this going to cost, et cetera. So as this discussion is ramped back up, so this is a snapshot, okay? I put a date on there for a reason, because that is the project, the balance from the bond and the bond premium, every dollar that is connected with a larger high school project, subtracting from that the contracts that we signed and change orders and anything else that we've committed to. So that doesn't count anything else that has come up or will come up on that project after July the 8th. And so, almost $1 million. This is a significant amount of money, and you could take some amount of that and devote that toward something outside of that project. But there are going to be other unforeseens. There are going to be other change orders. We're doing really well on allowances, so part of that number could go up. But you're going to want to do some cosmetic stuff when you're done. There are some things you're going to want to buy. There are some things Stacy's going to want to buy, and I'm going to want to tell her yes along the way. So that's, $750,000. The rainy day fund, if you look at your fund report, is in excess of $3 million, but you have made Well, I think you did it. Maybe I did it, but there's around $2 million of commitments to get this football project done. And so once you pay for all that, and the positive of this is the foundation raised almost $800,000. And in the psychology that's out there, hey, the foundation raised $1 million for this. Well, it's really about 745,000, and it's really in 10 annual payments.
Yeah.
So they've cut us a check for $100,000, which we appreciate, but that's $100,000 toward a project that's going to cost us right at $2 million. So we have to have $2 million to pay those bills as they come due here in the next few weeks. Well, you just approved payment of some claims tonight for that project. So there's roughly 1.4 million left that's not currently committed in the rainy day fund to anything. So that's, you know, a little more than 2 million that's in, I'll say, relatively discretionary cash that you could use for major capital improvements. So that doesn't get you to a $3 million softball facility. So that's why I'm in the mode of, okay, you know, is there a more affordable way to do this? What is absolutely essential? And to be honest, now Kara probably wouldn't be comfortable with this, but if you said we're going to spend 1.3 million tonight, and you legally you're not to the place where you can do that because of the size of the project. But if we were going to do that, I would say I'm okay with that. It's a little bit of a stretch, but we can do it knowing that we're gonna have to say no on some other things that we can wait on. I would be comfortable with that. If it's 2 million, then we're starting to impair our ability to plan for some unforeseens. So if there's some big unforeseen, then I have to make sure I've got operations fund money to fund it, or I've got to be able to go quickly get a GO bond to put in the new chiller or whatever it is that kind of isn't unforeseen. So you can also look at the operations fund, because certainly that in the olden days was the capital projects fund. And if you looked at it in your fund report that's in your board packet, you're going to go, well, there's basically $2 million in there. Don't forget, it gets funded twice a year. So the cash flow into that, it's based not entirely, but largely on property tax. There's a tax draw in June that dumped in there. You can go back to early May and see that the balance was below $500,000. And so we have to cash flow everything in the operations fund on the basis of those tax draws, all the transportation, all the maintenance, all the utilities. And there are times in the year where our operations fund balance will fall below what we would consider our prudent reserve. So it's not to say that you're never going to be able to spend money out of operations for capital improvements. You can, you just can't do giant projects from it. Could we contribute some to a softball project? Maybe, but right now we're at the high water mark. So I don't anticipate that we will transfer any money from operations to rainy day this year, because we'll spend down the current balance as we go through and we wait for our draw at the end of the year. So, okay, what does that mean then? Well, is there any other money available? Well, yeah, I mean, you always have to have some creative option to try to figure out how to get where you need to be. We've been transferring money from our education fund into our rainy day fund. And if you looked at that balance, you go, hey, there's some money in there. Well, at one point in time, the high water mark in the education fund that was about 12 million. It's currently about 5 million. And you go, well, that doesn't sound too bad, until you realize that is it 1.2, 1.3 million of it is curricular materials. So it used to be the textbook rental fund that the legislature just told us to park there. So you can't spend that on anything but computers and textbooks. So you're under 4 million. So you've effectively spent down around 8 million in your education fund in the course of the last 5 or 6 years. Where did it go? Well, it went into the middle school, it went into Pleasantview. It didn't go into Pleasantview. It went into transportation and middle school and into this project. So will we make another transfer from education into rainy day at the end of the year? Probably, possibly. We can backfill some of that. Remember though, those are instructional dollars. It's almost entirely funded from the state. If you read about politicians getting irritated about how schools spend their money, that's a piece of that. That's bargainable money that we're going to bargain with teachers for teacher compensation. So that's in my mind. Then there's this question of how much debt capacity do you have? You could, if you wanted to, say, well, we're going to go ahead and take our current debt that we're discussing tonight, that we just approved the lease rental on, and the paperwork is written for capital improvements. And so you could take that up to another $1.5 million, up to $5 million, and use some of that money. But you also know you're going to reduce your collection in your operations fund when you do that, because that debt is circuit breaker limited. So that's the one side of the ledger. Okay. Can Yorktown Community Schools come up with the money to fund a $3 million softball facility in short order? Yes. Then I want you to think about what else might you want to do after you do that. And so people have come and stood right there, at least 3 of them that I can think of, and advocated that we need to spend some money in our pool. It isn't going to be $3 million, I don't think. There's a movement out there that they want performing arts to be better funded, and they want money in the auditorium. So what I want you to think through is, if we say, well, this is our problem to solve right now, let's solve it, we've got these resources to solve it, you're going to impair your ability to easily fix, thing B, C, and D. And maybe that's okay. That's part of what the strategic planning process is supposed to do too. So part of it is you have to tell me, but I think I also have an obligation to respond with some facts and say, you got to consider, if you're going to put $3 million in softball, you may have to sit in this boardroom and say to people, I'm sorry, we're not going to do the pool right now, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's why, to me, it's worth our effort, which is what you're doing, Ryan, and it's what Brian Wagner's done for us on the Cooley side of things, is to try to find a way to make sure that we're getting what we want the most affordable way possible. And I think the other thing that maybe I sense in here is we've spent some time and energy in trying to come up with some real pricing, some budget pricing, some concepts, but there's also this question of, do we have specifications that tell us exactly what we're going to get? And, we can do that. You're going to invest in doing that. That's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of money to do that effectively. Otherwise, through design build or through bot or whatever, you're kind of at the mercy of the firm that you're hiring to do it. In this case, you cannot hire Cooley to do this work tonight, because the size of the project, it has to go through bidding. And if it's going to be bid, it's going to have some specifications that are signed off on by a design professional in my mind.
Correct.
So
how does that work if they're design build? Because that's was it Greenfield that did it that way? They basically solicited, similar to the bot, an RFP, and then they had a response for a design build for a specific scope. I mean, it wasn't true specifications like our design build is for X. And I think on that one, Meyer and Agent maybe won that project, but
somebody has to come up with the specs or come up with the concept. Here's what we're going to build. And whether you bid it or whether you do the bot, you've got to come up with it.
And if I could
it's
say,
design build, the person building it is designing it, right? So like,
there's a requirement in the statute, and I'm not an expert on design.
It says even in design build, it says the governmental entity must hire an architect or an engineer to prepare and issue a combined request for qualifications. So in a design build method, yeah, an architect or engineer's got to prepare and issue the specs.
The thing that I see in this project, and
So that could be an action.
we can all kind of promote, or project, I guess is the word I'm using here, our experiences onto
Based on schedule.
this.
To do another work
If
session.
we were to go into Brennan's trailer and look at the mountains of specifications and drawings for that $16 million project, it's incredibly detailed. Well, that's Skillman's book of business, and that's why Skillman's saying it's a $3 million project, because their delivery model is to say, get it all ironed out up front, and then we're going to enforce it. There's also a method that says you hire somebody, and design build is kind of this way, I think. Bot, it sounds like it's kind of this way. You hire somebody that you trust, and then you trust them that it's going to come out. And so there's a little bit of faith in oh yeah, okay, I trust them.
I would think that we would hire a design build team or a construction firm that would already have engineers on staff or working very closely with them.
That's what Schmidt, when we used to use Schmidt, they had in-house.
Yeah, they did. They had in-house engineers. But you
What
also
did we
paid
pay
them a
for
design fee.
already? What was that? Was that just for the scope?
It's
like
a
just
site.
as in
We
a
paid
site?
for some site survey work, and so that's through Context Design, which that's an engineering firm.
Thanks for going through that, because when we talked the other day, I was trying to I think I was just thinking the opposite direction. Like, we've got 2 projects we committed up front. We had $3 million of cash left over from the current project. We've now committed 2 to football, so we have really left over 1. In my mind, I was taking the total bond of $5 million less the roof to come with, like, I think we can afford $2.5 million based upon just that simple equation. So I think I agree. It seems like it's 2 to 2.5. It seems like we can get it closer to 2 at the end of the day, but it depends on scope.
Ryan, the other piece of that is that, so we got approval for a $15.5 million bond, and we set a $20 million project. And so we bonded for $15.5 million. We have already paid about $1 million in design costs that's not even reflected in that. So I'm going to start doing numbers from memory, so when I go off the rails, you can stop me, Kara. But it's
well, I think your math here would align with my thought. Is like, we have
Yeah.
1.3 left over. We have like 1.5
we
bond proceeds.
we are going to
Hate to say left
have
over,
spent, and I didn't put this in here, but I looked at it. We will have spent roughly 16 to 16.5 million, I think, all in on this project. Does that number sound right to you? So the hard construction cost was 13.5 million, and then when you get cost of issuance, you get construction management, you get architects' fees, and then some of that was paid up front. It's 16 million plus. And so the savings was cash that we had in our rainy day fund and in our operations fund and in our education fund that we didn't transfer to rainy day. So I'm not saying it wasn't a savings, because we're saving over what we could have spent, but it wasn't like the bond amount was 15.5 million. We've already committed to spending 16 million. So there's really very little left over from the bond. You can see what it is there.
I just, in my mind, treat those committed funds of 20 were not spent.
Well,
so
and we were banking on committing virtually all of our rainy day fund to that, plus some additional transfers over there. We're not going to have to do that because the project came in $3 million under budget. So then we've come back through, and the board's commitment to football initially was $1 million. And then it's one of those, which we had this conversation the other day of, well, we really should bring the bleachers up to compliance. That's over and above. Well, we really want to make our press box look nice. That's over and above. And so all of a sudden you're at $2 million. that's a lot of your savings.
But we are front loading that. It's coming back at some point. So
Yeah,
theoretically,
it will.
Like
Over 10 years.
Cost that softball's taken away, you replenish that over time.
And we're not, as I said, we're not in dire fiscal condition as a district. I mean, we have this good problem that people before me and before all of you except for Tom, there were decisions that accumulated cash that the district has been able to use, I think, responsibly to improve facilities. And, sometimes people go, oh, how'd you make that look so easy? Well, we've spent a lot of cash. We've spent a lot of cash on facilities. It's a one-time expense. But, I think you have to give some direction. And if you're asking me, I do think it'd be worthwhile to bring your softball people in and ask them, okay, what do you think is absolutely essential? What kind of material do you want? And not that they get to be the final deciders because you're the board, they're not, but to get some input.
Yeah.
And then I guess I feel like
did that already, right?
I don't know that our softball coaching staff has ever really.
How do we
been
get the
invited
wish
to.
list? Do we want a softball or we want a batting cage? We
So
want
in
nets.
2018, we had a long-term facilities planning committee.
Right.
Schmidt and Associates, there was a surveying.
That was like if you had unlimited time, right? Like
Right.
if you had a
Right.
specific
But
conversation
we
on
went
softball.
through and prioritized wants, needs, wish list.
And that's how softball initially got on the list.
Correct.
But
It
we
was-
had a committee meeting specifically on softball and what are the important things. That's how we came up. Like we really want to make sure batting cages happen. We want
don't-
to make sure the nets are there so they protect. the
I don't
tennis
think our
courts.
softball staff was invited.
Paul was included in that. I don't know about the softball staff specifically,
Yeah.
but my thought is you still have a period of time where if you get the process started, if you look at the schedule, right, there is a design timeline of you've got 2 months where that stuff is vetted. So my thought is if the goal is we want to be ready, is you are going to work backwards from that, right? So looking at their schedule, they have to start construction by 10/1. So it's like, all right, how do you get to that? Can we start a commitment to design at this meeting? Then by next meeting, you're issuing the open bid, which is that open 30 days?
Generally,
So you're really not getting the responses until 9/15.
I was hoping that the softball folks and Stacy and Paul could just join us in our work session if they're able to attend.
I think that'd be fair. Because I do think generally we know what they want. It's just like, how important is
Yeah.
turf or how important
That's
is
what I was gonna
press
say, but do
box?
we really? Because I think sometimes we hear one coach might want this, and another person might be like, we just want our own field. It's not necessarily we want to have, as Rachel had once said, the Taj Mahal. I don't want to speak for her. Like she wanted to be here, but her child's in supreme showmanship tonight. I think that there's a plethora of coaches or assistants, whatever you want to call everybody that works with our softball team that could also offer insight.
There's not only so many options. Like, all right, do you want a masonry dugout or do you want aluminum?
Prefab, right.
There's not. I agree that normally it's like there's a lot of options. Are you good not having batting cages? No, they're not. They've already said that. So like, what do you cut out? On
I
this
think there's
list?
some things that I look at it and I'm like, we have to have a flagpole, don't get me wrong, but I'm like, it's $16,000 for a 30-foot flagpole.
If we do that,
It's little things like that to me that could add up over time where then you can make the project fit within what budget we do have available. So
we all know we're not going back to we've never gone back to a project and redone anything. So
I know somebody at my
That is
household
100%
would be really mad at me for
not true.
saying this, but let's look at parking lot. I mean, you could go a gravel over a paved parking lot. Don't tell my husband I said that.
To begin with.
To begin with, I mean,
I want to do it right.
We can't.
We've had a softball or a soccer parking lot that's been gravel with a porta potty for years, and we can't seem to figure out how to redo that. So I stand by. We don't ever go back to projects once we commit to them. So we got to get it right. I just don't see a ton we can cut out, but.
So let's have our work session. Let's invite all the parties. I'd like to, again, have our AD, our principal, Rachel, Ryan Jarman, if he wants to come, whoever they'd like to have attend. I mean, like, I'd like to be pretty tight. I don't want necessarily
I would
maybe
agree.
50
Yeah.
people from the salt.
Maybe you ask your head coach, and if he wants to bring a couple
Yeah,
people
Jeremy
with
was
him.
gone last week on vacation, I think, so I tried to get hold of him, but he was out. But, you know, I think, you know, a finite number of folks and let's block out, right? It's probably gonna take more than an hour, honestly.
Can we have the options available? I mean, it's either astro or natural or masonry or, I mean,
100%.
Brian, do you have a list of all the
I think we
different
have it,
options
actually. I
that,
think we have all the data.
or Dr.
I'm not
Henshaw?
trying to add expense to it, but I do wonder if you want to have somebody with some design expertise.
I would think you would need.
So whether that's Fred Prezo,
That was my thought, is like, if you're incorporating, we want input through this process, like the value, like, we can all guess, but we really don't know. It's like, to me, if you don't start the process now, you're not gonna be ready for next season. So the answer is, we wanna do that, so I think that's the decision we're gonna make. If the goal is to get it ready, the answer is, we have to get a design proposal and probably get them signed up by the work session, whether that's context design. And then when you publish, maybe you can somehow.
Context has already done some of this work, and they do a lot of this kind of work as the engineer, and I
Really, you
wonder
can't get a number until you get
if
the
they
spec.
could design the specs and stamp them.
Do we have to bid that, or can we just
Not
engage with
a
them?
design professional, you don't. Agree with that.
So that's my preference is tonight.
Can you get a quote for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's basically doing it on an hourly basis for us. So I'll just shoot him an email or call him and say, could you be available? And I think if for no other reason, because he can offer some suggestions based on experience, and he can probably also take some notes, which is another thing that we suffer from a little bit, is you can get a lot of ideas flowing and everybody thinks they know what was said, but that doesn't always come out in writing so that you have a record of it.
I was curious, I don't want to derail it off of this, but, you know, as there's all the rumbles of a quote roundabout possibly going in at that intersection. I know, right? So
This was a jump. You're going from softball to roundabout.
well, because of its position of us quote maybe expanding the parking lot needs, is that something that we need to
It would
reassess
be going in the
also?
opposite direction.
But I thought the original one that we showed was the parking lot was going
To the
following
west.
along. Would that be River Road?
Yeah, it would be going west,
Okay.
away from the proposed roundabout.
There's just gonna be a lot of possible site work needed for that to actually flow properly, if that's the future.
But you're going to the parking lot going west, right? The roundabout's the other direction, right?
It'd be right in the pretty much center of that.
The design I saw,
You just had enough. We pull that back up.
Yeah.
Of the
it
parking
would
lot.
be where the current
Sorry.
intersection is. They would be taking part of our property to the south of our tennis facility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so back where the artistic right there where your arrow is, that's where it would go. Whereas parking lot would go.
There was a proposed one that I have viewed that it showed multiple lanes of River Road needed in order to make a quote roundabout work in that area. So it'd be like encroach, like our walkway or the
Yes.
drive entrance into like,
It would be there might be an additional lane on the east side of Tiger.
North.
Around the corner, and then possibly on the north side of River.
okay, gotcha.
Along in there.
So I guess just looking at dates, if you say I'm going to get a proposal, the time clock doesn't start until they have a design. Can you dual track like the, I guess, advertisement for the design build contractor simultaneously to when the specs are being issued?
difficult.
I think your design build firm is going to develop your specs.
Yeah.
I think that's what you just reading the specs have to be part of the public process.
As I read the
That's what you did,
statute,
right?
I don't know how much of these you've done, Steve, but as I read the statute, there's supposed to be some independence between the designer
Yeah.
and the builder.
Correct.
The design builder selected is responsible for both the design and the construction of the project.
Maybe not.
But it does say the governmental entity creates a committee containing a licensed architect and engineer along with others that scores all aspects of the responses submitted.
And that was,
I don't know what the documents that they're submitting on. Like,
it's basically an RFP. They do a design that they submit, and then you can actually pay a stipend to people for submitting them, even if you don't select them. And then you make a selection of who you want based on the RFP that they responded to.
Yeah, so on design build, you're hiring an architect or engineer to prepare and issue your combined request for qualifications, request for proposals. So they're putting together the specs.
so in that case,
And-
we wouldn't have to hire a context.
What I hear is, again, Steve, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but the real savings in some of these alternate methods is in larger projects. And the smaller projects, the theory is you're going to be able to find a good general contractor that's going to come in and do this for you. So really it's a matter of you deciding as the owner what's it going to be. But that's just the
Yeah,
chatter I heard.
I've not seen bot used on small projects very often.
It looks like most of the time they've been
Bridges
and
convention
and,
centers and
and highways and
Yeah.
And I think we're all in agreement. The most affordable, expeditious way to do it. So,
But design build allows Keeley or the 528 or anybody else in that realm to bid on it or respond.
probably,
Yeah.
but you're gonna have to hire the designer. So, and I think we
Well,
can
that's
explore some.
We don't hire the designer, we hire the designer to vet the proposals.
You're talking about on
On
design
the
build.
Design build.
The people that specialize in design
They
build
score it.
make their money somewhere.
Government
Yeah,
entity will
they
hire
must,
an
yeah.
architect or engineer. Dave, did I send you this?
No.
Can I send it to you? You can pull it up on the screen real quick. I mean, it's only 7:15. It's going to be daylight for another 2 hours, folks.
Need to get to the fair. Come on.
But they prepare the solicitation for responses.
I would think so, yeah.
So that's the action we have to take to start moving, would be to hire someone to prepare the solicitation.
Performance Services is an example of an established design build firm. And it's all in-house, but of course, there's a fee. And their argument is that you're going to get the contractor you want. You're not going to take the risk of having to have a contractor that you don't want on site. But then, I think the jury would be out as to whether it's really a savings. It's just a different delivery method. We could have Skillman come in and tell us how construction management's the right way to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk to the different architecture firms, the ones who don't use the construction manager methodology as the architecture firm are like, why would you ever use a construction manager to do your project?
Because they want a fee for project administration.
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, the only thing I guess I would say on the finance side is two things. If we bond part of the softball project, let's say at least half of it,
You're saying like in addition to the current bond, like going to the 5 million that we have now?
either as part of that. The only thing I
That
don't
would
like
be-
about that is it's a 20-year bond. It's
Correct.
not.
Right.
I don't love the idea of financing the softball field for 20 years.
But
it's the simplest route to go.
your
by
cost
far.
of issuance and all that is already baked in.
You can make additional payments or refinance it, right, if you want to go lower.
Yeah, pay it off quicker. I like that idea better than saying, let's take our 2.2 million that we have left over.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's responsible for us to say,
I agree.
that's
I don't
spent
either.
in cash. I just don't think we can. So if you took $1 million in bond and if you could build our all-in facility, if you could get it for something south of 2 million, I think you have to have money left over the course of the next 12 to 24 months to be able to touch the pool. And I think the auditorium and the, our folks that are, we can't just continue to spend all of our ECA money on athletic facilities. We can, but I think we've got to look at our arts and our arts program and our music program, and we need to touch those. There's a lot of kids and a lot of families that participate in those as well that don't participate in athletics at all.
Well,
those
and our
facilities
auditorium
need to be
needs a
touched.
lot of work.
Absolutely.
My armrest came off of my arm the last time I was in there, so, and there was no seat in the seat beside me, so.
Take your own armrest.
Well, and when we go
It
through the
definitely
strategic planning
needs it.
process, hopefully those projects will also rise to the top in terms of needs as well. And at that point in time, we can hopefully look at costs of what we can invest in those too. But
those next projects take time, right? Like softball's been a discussion for 5+ years.
I'm not saying delay
Finding-
softball.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, Brent. I'm just saying that's why I don't want to spend
Right, I
the
agree.
full $2.2 million
Yeah.
that we have.
Oh,
left there.
cash for sure. That was my always thought. Is like $1 million, $1.5 million of cash. The rest is bonded. You get to 2.5. You have $500,000 left over of proceeds. But- So really, timeline-wise, if we're gonna get this done, like we got to get the solicitation prepared to be presented at the next board meeting. That would put responses due at the September board meeting. And you probably don't award it till the following board meeting, right?
Oh, we have a special board meeting.
Or you could have a special board meeting too.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep in mind, we can vote during a work session because it's a public.
But the solicitation and those things have
30
to be
days.
30 days, right?
Generally speaking, yes.
It's like, I think the one thing we can expedite with a special meeting is the ability to give you direction to prepare a select the firm to prepare the solicitation. They essentially have to get that ready for the September board meeting. And then you really got that board meeting plus 30 days to award. The earliest that puts you at the October board meeting before you really ever start full design.
On design build, you can see up there on hopefully you can see on the screen, it's behind you, Jason, that
Is that what you're looking for?
go up one, Dave.
You were
Is there
thinking
one
that
more?
Your screen was up there.
Yeah, it was. I was like, yeah, that's cool. No, I'm sorry. Roll down. So
There, page number.
Page 7 of the PDF.
thank you. Just needed some. There we go. So minimum 37-day response period for projects over 5 million, or a 15-day
Oh.
response period required for projects costing more than 5 million, but can be longer. That actually says kind of the same thing. I think the second one
Should be probably less.
should be for
Less.
projects costing less than 5 million. It has a 15-day response period. So there's another opportunity to squeeze a couple of weeks, but perhaps on the process on a design build.
So they
So
actually
is there consensus amongst this group to A, do softball, B, do it for somewhere around $2 million, and C, to do it for next spring? Is that what we're all five working toward? And if not, say so. Is that?
I
I mean,
don't
I know you-
necessarily have like a price line on it, but yes, I mean, I
Yeah.
had a softball queued in 2 years ago.
How
We
about
were-
2 million or less? I kind of like that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you're
I
at
mean,
1.7 and you don't have parking yet.
I know.
So,
I know.
I mean,
And I'm just going to offer this, and I don't mean to be a wet blanket, but spring spring isn't ideal. You're talking about some moving parts. If you're going to go back through and use a process that we haven't used before, there's some scaling up that has to happen just to even put that in place.
Yeah.
I think the luxury we have before is similar to tennis, right? If you're late, you do what you do this year.
Right.
Or
You already have a
mid-season,
field that
you're
you're
not
using.
like,
Yeah.
Correct. Right.
we have a backstop.
It is not
No
like
pun intended.
it is not like football,
Right.
where
Yeah.
we're going to have it done at a certain point in time.
Or science labs, or
So to answer your question, I'm a yes
Sounds
on,
like it.
on,
Okay.
on what you're describing.
I'm a yes on all those, except I think it's gonna be 2.5 or lower would be mine. But I guess we can amend it later if it comes in higher, but the goal is to get as low as possible.
Dr. Henschel, if we go with a bond for $1 million, I mean, what's the latest that we can? So that it,
It's already in process.
Yeah.
The one we
oh,
currently
I
have.
thought, okay, so we're pulling, okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, I think we agree that.
And
that's
I
probably the
will,
easiest way to do it.
You know, interest rates are different. I will tell you, Karen and I are going to have a rating call. I guarantee you our bond rating is going to be lowered because our cash position is worse. So, I mean, there's going to be some additional cost to do it that way baked in there somewhere. But that's probably the easiest way to do it if that's what you're convinced you're going to do, rather than doing a separate one. For one thing, do you want to use general obligation capacity to do it? And if not, then you got to go back through the building corporation process.
If you do
Which
it,
adds
a separate one.
more time. Mm-hmm. You'd have to
Yeah.
go through
It'd
that
take
process.
4 months.
So I guess I want to come back to, I feel like the one thing that's still hanging out there is I think you got to have somebody in the room that can lead you through the discussion of design. And
Totally agree. I think there's gotta be a consensus amongst everybody. This is what we're getting. That's what I don't know or understand about the Cooley bid, because I don't know what it's based on, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, well, good faith, they built it before. Well, maybe, but, you know, if their version of a dugout's different than what the softball coach thinks he's
Right.
getting, and he picked a lowest grade possible turf, I don't know. I don't know what he based it on.
Yeah.
And I think this board has a responsibility to say, we're getting what we want here, not just trusting, oh, they know what they're doing, maybe.
I guess I'm going to say again, it seems to me like the person that's got the most expertise and the highest level of neutrality is context design, Fred Prezo, because he's already looked at it. And I think Fred has enough business that if you said, we're not going to use you again, he'd say, fine, I'll see you in a different project. But he's not a design builder, he's an engineer. So I think he can give you relatively objective recommendations about what to do and who to talk to. My fear is if you don't have if you bring in, if it's Cooley or if it's Meyer Najum or whoever, they're going to have an incentive to say, here, this is how we can do it for you. And maybe that's the right way, maybe it's not. Whereas if you got somebody that's got some objectivity there, they can say, here's what's worked and here's what hasn't worked.
And I don't think it's, 100 different decisions, but there's probably 8 or 10 important ones that there needs to be a consensus amongst athletics and administration and the board. This is what we want. Because I've heard, well, we're building a Taj Mahal. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
so could you reach out to Fred
I can do that.
and see what his availability would be? Let's say over the next, I'd love it to be next week if he could do an evening next week, but I think we need to, I'm going to reach out to Rachel as well too and see if she can give me contact information for Jeremy.
Well,
And
Stacy can
We
do
have
that.
it,
Right.
yeah.
Do you have that?
Yeah, I mean, we can organize them for you as soon
Okay.
as you let us know.
That would be great. And let's see when Fred's available first.
Okay.
And if he has a couple of evenings in mind, then we can float those to the board and the group
In
as
the
a
next
whole.
couple of weeks.
Yeah, and
Ideally.
see what date seems to work for everybody and schedule it. I think it's going to take more than an hour, to be honest with you.
I agree.
Can they prepare the solicitation simultaneous to that? Because really, it's the timeline of the 15-day period. Can they plan on a work session, prepare the solicitation for Again, I assume there's a template for it.
And who's the they?
Context, probably.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether.
Do we need to give you?
I don't know whether Context personally is a design build firm.
But they're not design building it. They're preparing the solicitation.
So I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's a question I can ask.
Do we need to give you action to? Because again, I think we have this weird window. It's like if we wait 30 days to actually prepare the solicitation, we're not getting it done next year.
All I can do is ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if we had to give you action to.
No, I don't.
Solicitation.
I mean, honestly, the only thing that the board really only needs to approve bonding and contracts. In a perfect world.
Because the one that Greenfield, I think it's Greenfield, was like a 1-page solicitation. So if the answer is it's easy, they can get out by 8/1. You open up for 15 days, the bids could come in, or the responses by the next board meeting, potentially. If it's the 2 15-day periods.
And if not, then again, you can convene a special meeting.
Yeah. Right.
At any time.
Workshop.
Yeah.
Or work session.
Because it seems like none of the actual design happens until that group is selected, right? It's like that's the key, is how do you get to that stage, and then it's everybody's included, and you're going to get a attentive. Okay.
Okay, do you have enough to be dangerous now?
Probably.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So dangerous.
All right. Anything else you want to add before we wrap that up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Okay, I think that takes us to the end of the rainbow. Final closing comments, starting with you, Dr. Henshaw.
A lot of these we covered, but I do want to really emphasize the staffing piece. At the end of the day, the primary thing that we do is instruction of students, and so we do invest a lot of time and energy in trying to make sure that we are attracting and retaining the best instructional staff. And so anytime you can start the year fully licensed, fully staffed, I've lived on the other side of that, even a few years here, and it's better to be this way. The football project, I know there's some anxiety around it, but it's all the parts are currently moving, and so we'll just continue to move forward day by day. And I think once it starts to come together, it's going to come together quickly. The high school project, we were having a little off the record conversation here before the meeting started about there's going to be some really great, there already are some great spaces in there, and there's going to be some more to come, and it's going to be super useful when it's all done, all that space, safety, and all those considerations. The tennis courts were resurfaced. They finished that last week. I was over there this morning with Paul taking a look, and there was a tennis camp going on, and they look considerably, well, they look perfect. I mean, they look like new. So we'll see. And I appreciate the cooperation of our contractor and our subs and everybody in making this happen at no cost to us. And so we'll continue to watch that, but I appreciate all that. So this is all embargoed, so I can't really talk about it, but I've seen our AP scores and I've seen our iLearn scores, and I'll just say we're moving in the right direction, and there's going to be some good stuff that we're going to release later. And I know the board's heard me say this before, but my sense, my interpretation of what the average parent values at Yorktown is, at the end of the day, does my Yorktown high school student graduate with a diploma that is the key to open doors after high school? And one of those doors is, can I get into the university I want to get into, and am I going to be successful when I get there? And we just see that over and over and over and over again. And we had a board member who used to talk about it's not by chance or luck or accident. And there's a lot of work that goes on inside those buildings every day to make sure that that's all aligned. And I think they make it look easy. And sometimes we go, oh yeah, okay, well, that's nice. But one of our principals, said, we have a world-class high school. It wasn't Stacy. And, the things that come out of those programming K to 12 are pretty phenomenal. And so I just want to highlight that. And then I saw in X that we had a Yorktown alumnus in the MLB draft. The number was pretty high, but that's still pretty cool as a percentage. And that's not the first one ever either. And so just another example of you take a Yorktown experience and you use that to open a door in whatever you want to do. That's really the test of us as a school system. And so that's, again, my commendation to everybody involved in that.
Okay. Ashley?
I don't have a lot to say, but congratulations on having all of our positions filled, coming from a school system that we haven't started fully staffed, I would say, in the last probably 6-7 years. We haven't started fully staffed. So it's a big deal because a lot of schools are not fully staffed right now in the state of Indiana, and they won't be. So, and it may be all year that they won't be. So the fact that we can keep our staff and maintain new staff is a very positive thing for us. And thank you for all of your hard work you've done with all of this too.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. Ryan?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we've had a staffing issue since probably you've been here. So I think we kind of ignore that fact because it's the easy button and we're always there. So I know there's a lot that goes into making that happen. Yeah, the construction projects, I know you guys see the day-to-day pain of the headaches that come along with it. So appreciate you guys just working with people in your way and the musical chairs. So thanks.
Yes, thank you to Dr. Henshaw for getting everybody staffed and ready to go for the next school year. No emergency license, that's huge.
So far.
Yeah. I would also just like to let everybody know that the town is also doing a strategic plan. And so that survey is available online, and to fill that out and to get your input out there for the future of what Yorktown looks like. That was from the town council as well as the redevelopment and parks board, I believe, are all part of that right now. And then I just want to give a shout out to Yorktown, the students out at the fair this past week. They are rocking it, and I think right now you have 2, if not 3, in supreme showmanship. That's out of 6 different areas, so that's huge. Lots of grand champions and reserves, and beyond that, friendships, and just they represent our town and school corporation really well. So.
And real quick, I dropped my son off at FCA yesterday camp, and tons of Yorktown kids there. Mm-hmm. I bet we have the most there, so another good showing there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Are your kids are
they're there right now?
Yeah.
Hopefully. We also had I think I might have mentioned this. Farm Bureau awarded only 2 10-year 4-H member awards, and Yorktown, one of our students received one of those. Mm-hmm. And then I think tonight there was also recognition. We maybe have 5 10-year 4-H members from Yorktown. So
that's awesome.
Another huge commitment. So well represented tonight. I think probably the most out of any school district in Delaware County.
Very nice.
That's great.
Good.
Are you doing goats and chickens or just goats?
Just goats.
Okay.
Go to market tomorrow.
I wanted to say head, heart, hands, and health.
It's all in.
What was that?
The 4-H.
Your 4-H's.
I don't know if I can remember the pledge. But.
Yeah, as others said, good job on the staffing. Piece of cake, right?
That I don't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
they do it, but
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
And just thank the board and everybody for, I think, the support of all these athletic projects. I think it was exciting to hear you talking about walking through that space, and I just think what that'll mean to the kiddos. And I know athletics is getting tons of attention in the last 2 or 3 years, but I've said this before, we didn't touch it for 30 years, and so rightfully so. And so I'm excited what this does for the kids and those opportunities. So good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Just briefly, kudos to you, and I know a lot of this is embargoed right now, but our AP scores, the graduation rate, our recognition we received last year from several different publications about how well the high school's doing, and in a really competitive environment, Yorktown continues to be a smaller school that is right up there with all of the the schools in the Beltway and elsewhere around the state that have all the resources in the world. There's money wise to spend. So congratulations to you and your crew and all your hard work. It's not by accident, as Dr. Henshaw indicated. And I just want to thank Dr. Henshaw for all of, Vicki's mentioned, we seem to have a construction project going on for the last 7 or 8 years, probably because we have. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact of everything that makes up your job that's part of being a public school superintendent. And it's so many different moving parts. And then when you add in all of the things that you're involved in, that you're managing and coordinating as part of our again, our capital improvements that we've been doing, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. And you handle it with skill and grace and managing a lot of different personalities and anyway, I just really appreciate you and all that you do. So it is 20 till 8 and we now stand adjourned. We have lots to sign.